Some of you might recognize me. My name is Kevin. If you were here last week and you're back again this week, I thank you. Thank you for coming. And if you've been coming for a long time, thank you for coming again. It's great to have you. I've been on sabbatical for 5 months. And it's been, man, I just realized I like you guys. I missed you guys. It's good to be back. I was so thankful. But one of the challenges that I realized about sabbatical is you have this kind of pressure, or I had it anyway. You really want God to do something, and then you go, okay, what do I have to do to get God to do something? God, do something. What shall I do? This is weird sort of thing, because I think there was a role for us in that, but that was an interesting thing for me to navigate. And near the end of my sabbatical, I had this feeling that there was still some work that I thought needed to happen in me, in my life. And try to figure out what we were going to do. So we decided that we would go to Scotland. It's where all people go when they need work done, right? But there's this place in Scotland called Iona. It's this ancient island off an island off an island. And this is the place where St. Columba landed in 563 and where Christianity spread to Great Britain from there. It's this incredibly sacred, holy place that's had a Christian presence there since then. There's abbeys that people have been worshiping in for almost thousands of years, still there. And we had a chance to go worship in one of these abbeys. It was amazing. So I would call it a pilgrimage. In July, we made this pilgrimage to Iona. And we were so excited. And we wanted to experience some rest, feel some peace, and really experience something of the presence of God. So we had these expectations, but we also had a question. 3 days on this tiny island. What will we do? Will it be boring? I mean, it's only 2 by 3 kilometers. It's a very small island. We arrived at the retreat center on the island not the way we wanted to arrive. We arrived stressed out and not relaxed because we missed the ferry and we got lost trying to find the retreat center. We walked 2 kilometers when it was 100 meters because we looked at Google Maps and just followed it and there's no reception. Not very smart, right? There was a sign that said retreat center, 100 meters. We went around the island, got to the retreat center, and I was aware that I was feeling not peaceful, not relaxed, not calm. I was kind of wired, actually, and I was trying to speak slowly when they greeted us. And to make matters worse, everything there it was like a Christian retreat center hostel, so we eat together. We missed dinner. Like, I really wanted dinner. As we were walking past all the sheep, there was a ditch, and I'm like, I'm done. I just want to lay down in this ditch and sleep. I'm so tired. I didn't. We got there an hour late, and they graciously greeted us and brought us dinner, which was really nice. Yay for Catholics. Yay for Baptists. We were eating dinner all alone because we were late, and this couple came just to see us. They came from upstairs to the dining room to see us, and they started talking to us, and they introduced themselves. Maddie and Stevie. I'm like, okay, can you spell that for me? Oh, Mary and Stevie. Hello, I'm Kevin and Cindy. And they go, what? We don't understand. And I spelled Kevin and Cindy for them, and they understood. So it was kind of weird because we don't have an accent. Anyway, they started telling us about this place. Maddie and Stevie, good, right? Scottish, had been coming to the island for 20 years every year. And it had been this place of peace and restoration and experiencing something of the presence of God for them for 20 years. And it had done a lot for their lives, this place. So they were telling us all about the island and what happens on this island. They told us all this stuff, and I said, okay, yes, but what should we do? And they said, what should you do? And I said, yeah, what should we do? Well, you let the island do its work. I'm like, let the island do its work? Let the island do its work in you. It's like, I didn't really know what that meant. The disciples in Matthew 13 didn't know what to do. As a matter of fact, in the book of Matthew, a lot of the time the disciples don't know what they should do. They're kind of confused. What should we do? In chapter 13, they're encountering a Jesus who's telling lots of parables. He's already told 10 parables, and you get the feeling that they're getting a little bit tired of these parables. Jesus keeps speaking what seems like coded messages. All these answers and parables. And you get a sense that they're a little bit frustrated. This is what they say in Matthew 13:10. They say, Jesus, why do you speak in parables all the time? Get a sense that they just want a direct answer, right? Like, can you please be a straight shooter? Telling us all this stuff. Like, it's actually really confusing. What's all this stuff about beating around the mustard bush and scattering seeds in gardens and weeding vegetable patches? What's all this about? What should we do? What's all this stuff about lamps and logs? Old dirty wineskins and sand and stones. What is this stuff? What's this all about? I think they're frustrated because they had a huge crowd and Jesus had this opportunity. There are thousands of people listening to Jesus and he just didn't seem to want to tell it to them straight. What should you do? What should we do? What do we have to do to inherit the kingdom of heaven? What should we do? I get a sense that Jesus maybe needs a bit of a social media handler because it's not really that tweetable or Xable. Whatever it is, that thing. Maybe some communication coaching or yet better, a strategic planner because he just doesn't seem to have a strategic plan. It's not working out. So there's this huge turnout, and Jesus is speaking, and there's just nothing concrete. There's no apologetics. There's no truth. This is what you need to do. Here's what you need to do. Be this, be that. No, it's none of that. There's no evidence. There's no proof. Just more seeds and salt, dirt and dough. That sort of stuff. So they're getting frustrated. Why are you speaking in parables? And Jesus answers their question just as clearly. This is what he says. This is why I speak to them in parables. Though seeing, they do not see. Though hearing, they do not hear or understand. It's kind of a confusing answer. Why do you speak in parables? And I'm not sure that was really helpful for them. So we get to verse 33, our verse for today, and we read that Jesus told them still another parable. Still another parable. Yet another parable. The 10th one. Another parable. And this is what it is. It's just a short one, but it's kind of a real little doozy. 13:33. The kingdom of heaven is like yeast that a woman took and mixed into it about 60 pounds of flour until it worked all through the dough. Got it? It's the kingdom of heaven. It's just like that. Disciples asked, what's the kingdom of heaven like? Kingdom of heaven is like a lump of dough that someone throws yeast in. That's it. You know, I want to tell you though, if you've ever baked bread, 60 pounds is a lot of flour. I mean, you get your bread maker out and dump 3 20-pound bags in that bread maker and see what happens. This is enough for 70 loaves of bread if they're 3-cup loaves, okay? This is a lot of bread we're talking about. This is like a huge amount of bread. And this lady is walking by, and this bread is sitting there. It's already mixed, right? But it doesn't have any yeast in it. It's like flat bread. This flat bread's just sitting there. And she's walking by, and I imagine it like this. Oh, there's some dough there. I've got some yeast in my pocket. And then she mixes it all together when no one's looking, and then sneaks away. Boom, bread sabotage. Take that. Maybe she even said, let it rise. Who knows? But the thing is, she actually probably spent some time there because the thing with bread to mix in the yeast, which was probably starter at the perfect temperature in her pocket as she's walking around. You have to mix it in, right? Everyone knows that bread is like people. It needs to be kneaded. So she did that. She mixed it all in for a long time. And then she leaves. No one knows. This flatbread sitting there, and the people come back, and they go, oh, well, that's weird. Why is it coming out of the pot? It's like flowing all over the place. It's quadruple the size it used to be. It's all thick and stuff. You know when you make a mistake with your yeast and you put too much in? It's kind of like that. It's expanded greatly. And it's not flatbread anymore. It's alive. And this sourdough starter has gone through every single bit of the bread. It's permeated everything. All the dough, everything has been touched by this little bit of starter, this little bit of yeast. Jesus, what's the kingdom of God like? Well, the kingdom of heaven is like yeast that a woman took and mixed into about 60 pounds of flour until it all worked through. But what should we do, Jesus? What should we do? What should you do? Just let the yeast do its work. Let the yeast do its work? Let the yeast do its work. What should we do? I feel is a fair question. It's a question I ask all the time, and I hope it's a question you ask. What should we do? What do I do? I mean, we do have something to do. We're not called to do nothing. What should we do? We need to do our part. What should we do? I think there's a bit of a problem, though, because if you're like me or like the typical person in Canada, we want to make it all happen. We want to get it all done. We want to control the whole process. We want it on our terms. We want it to decide how and when things work. And when the yeast isn't rising fast enough, we say, rise faster. You're not working properly. I need better yeast. Grow. Grow, you bread. One of the things I learned on sabbatical and thought about it a lot is, what do you do when you want God to do something? What do you do when you want God to do something? When you want rest, renewal, and something to happen in your heart, what do you do? God, I want you to do something. Tell me what to do. There's strange questions with some tension in them, aren't they? Because I wanted God to give me some rest, and I just felt like maybe there's a recipe for rest. Like maybe some steps that I can do. 3 simple steps to rest. Do that and boom, you're rested. I'd be in complete control. Maybe renewal. Maybe there's a recipe for renewal. 3 simple steps. Done those. Good, my work is done. I've done it all. Boom, renewal. God, work in my heart. What are the steps? 1, 2, 3. Good, done. Task is completed. See, we want God to do something. And there's this tension between what we need to do. What should we do? Anything? You know, I think this passage makes it clear what we do. There's one thing that we do. We scatter the yeast. We're the ones who put the yeast in the dough. And then we let go. And we watch the yeast do its work. And then we just walk away. Like the lady in the parable. God does the work of the yeast. The person in the parable can't make the yeast be yeast. Just puts it in. So our calling is to be faithful. Faithfulness is like that yeast. It's a thing of the kingdom. And faithfulness is not easy. It's difficult work to be faithful. It's the work of scattering seeds and putting yeast in. Planting and kneading. It's tough work. But then you let go. Sabbatical, I think I was really trying to figure out what is the connection between being faithful and results. And I think we're called to be faithful and let go of the results. So I think we're called to do. And sometimes I think we get confused. I think we think like we're the hero in the story, because there's a good question to ask when you're reading parables or anything in the Bible. Where do I find myself in this parable? Where do we find ourselves in the parable of the yeast and the dough? Who are we? See, I think we're the lady. We're called to be like the lady. And God does the work of the yeast. It's the work of the kingdom. And I think the calling for us is to be faithful and just let God do his work, to let go and let it happen. So what should we do? We put yeast in the dough. That's what we do. I like the way the lady always had some yeast in her pocket. Imagine if we went through life like that. I just always got starter in my pocket, because you never know when you're going to find an unattended bowl of flour that you can mix the starter in. I think that's kind of like that with life. That's the kingdom actions, the starter in the pocket, the things that we always have with us ready to throw into the mix and see God's surprise emerge from that dough, from that mix, and watch it grow. It's like we're looking for opportunities, seeing where we can scatter the yeast. And once we see it, we go up to it, and we make ourselves small, and we throw it in there. If it's starter you have and not a packet of yeast, you mix it in. You mix that yeast in. And then you just kind of surrender control. You let go and let the yeast do its work. See, I think having a little bit of yeast in your pocket is the kingdom way. And the yeast that we scatter is just simple things, really simple things. It's living faithful lives. It's loving God and loving others. And having that yeast in your pocket is doing the actions of faith and just leaving the results to God. I think we all need to have some yeast in our pockets ready to go at all times. And scattering of yeast, it looks like this. It looks like you're looking for a way to do an act of kindness, and you see it. You scatter some yeast. You're looking for a way, or open to a way, to say that, sorry. Do you guys know how to say that word? Sorry? We find so hard. You're waiting for the opportunity to say sorry. And you say it. It's like scattering yeast. It's the work of the kingdom. You're waiting to be able to forgive people, the small things. This is the work of the kingdom, forgiveness. It's being humble when you actually could be proud. It's a humble response. That's scattering the yeast of the kingdom, and God magnifies that and makes it grow. It is being gentle when you have power. That's the yeast of the kingdom. And there's much more. Have that yeast ready at all times and scatter it. We scatter the yeast, but it's God who makes it rise. He expands it. Makes it happen. Iona, for me, I think, was one of the last lessons I needed to learn on sabbatical, but I know I have so much more, so don't hear last as like last. I haven't learned everything. I still remember it that I felt like I was the yeast. I needed to be the one that made things grow. What should I do to make God's rest happen? What must I do? Tell me. What must I do to experience peace? And we didn't know what to expect. Would it be super boring, like this island with a bunch of dead people on it from 1,000 years ago? What do we do? What do? You let the island do its work. Let the island do its work? Let the island do its work. So the island was like yeast in my life, and it was like God's work in my life. And I feel like it's left some fermentation in me that I've carried with me from that. I hope that doesn't sound kind of gross. Maybe I should choose a different term. God's work is still bubbling in me from that island. You know, there's this interesting connection with the saints from a long, long time ago that is kind of palpable. These people of God from so long ago, the sense of being deeply rooted in this history of the faith together with them. I carry that with me. There was a connection to Christians from all over the world that we met, and this feeling of unity around Christ. I carry that with me. There was a sense of God's work in history and in people's lives when they felt nothing was happening, but something was happening. I carry that with me. Mostly, I carry with me this lesson about letting go and let God do his work. I got to be honest with you, I probably need to keep learning that one. I need to go to class a couple more times. That's a tough one. God does the work. We just scatter the yeast. What would happen in our lives if we were faithful? We scattered that yeast in our lives. God would do the work with the yeast. We just scatter it. And what would happen in our church if we all scattered yeast where we needed to? When we saw an opening and we scattered yeast, God would make it grow. And what about Kelowna in our city? Those simple acts of the kingdom. Kindness, humility, mercy, scattering yeast. God makes it grow. What do? You put some yeast in the dough and watch it rise. We scatter the yeast. God makes it rise. Put some yeast in your pocket.